We have a place, all of us, in a long story, a story we continue, but whose end we will not see. It is the American story, a story of flawed and fallible people, united across the generations by grand and enduring ideals. The grandest of these ideals is an unfolding American promise that everyone belongs, that everyone deserves a chance, that no insignificant person was ever born. Americans are called to enact this promise in our lives and in our laws. And though our nation has sometimes halted and sometimes delayed, we must follow no other course.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the President and CEO of the George W. Bush Presidential Center, Ken Hirsch.
Good morning and welcome to the 2025 Forum on Leadership. And thank you all for being here, and those on the live stream, thank you for tuning in. Special thanks to President and Mrs. Bush for their inspiration, and special thanks also to all those who support our work. We could not do it without people who make an investment here. At the Bush Center, we believe in values, values upon which our country was formed: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But today is a good time to be reminded of those values. And it's important to understand that these values were aspirational values, accompanied by general guidelines from our founders, who did not give us a specific rule book. That was left for us to fight over later on. This is where those who like to criticize our country miss the underlying point, that our founders were aspirational realists who designed a system built upon and designed to survive internal contradictions. Our Declaration of Independence clearly states that our leaders derived their power from the consent of the governed. Yet, they also said that if men were angels, no government would be necessary. In other words, they set out to design a system to be governed by those whom they knew were flawed. Our white male founders personally struggled with equality, both gender and racial. Yet they recognized the aspirational value that all were created equal. They argued and fought with their opponents, yet they respected the rights of free speech and assembly. Now, how could a flawed and self-interested group come up with a clear set of governing rules? The answer is, they didn't. Rather, they set us to sail with a set of aspirational values and guidelines upon which we would write policies of the day to advance towards those values. They likely knew that the best we could achieve would be a jagged line along a slow upward curve of progress. And our record of 2 steps forward and 1 step back is nearly perfect. But it's important to note how far we've come along that curve. Our democracy has proven to be self-healing. Look at the measures of self-correction that we have taken as a nation: ending slavery, guaranteeing women the right to vote, civil rights amendments, the end of Jim Crow laws, and we have preserved the right to free press and, for the most part, free expression. Now, I am not naive to the hard work that we still have to do in these areas, but I also want to mark the progress we've made from a really unequal starting point. Our framers institutionalized messiness and the best-case scenario of 2 steps forward and 1 step back. A federalist system with a tug-of-war between state and federal power, 3 co-equal branches of government, and the 4th estate protected by free speech and free assembly, all built a temple of inefficiency to keep the central authority in check and to keep power rooted in the people. And despite our flaws, this was better than the alternatives, since the founders feared too much consensus from a central government. Today, we are witnessing a moment in time, like those that we have seen before in this country, where political pendulums are swinging, and the 3 branches of government's relative power is being challenged. Yet underneath it all our nation's values have not changed. While the manner in which our leadership executes these values may change, they do it in full view of the electorate that is poised to vote again every 2 years. This dynamic has held, despite its challenges over the decades. As President Bush knows all too well, and as Will Rogers explained, that's the trouble with a politician's life. Somebody is always interrupting it with an election. And that interruption is a good thing. Which brings me to our role here at the Bush Center, to not only promote these values, but also to defend them, as is our responsibility. When Ben Franklin emerged from the Constitutional Convention in 1787 and was asked if the closed-door session produced a republic or a monarchy, he replied, "A republic if you can keep it," which means both that it was our job to protect it and its survival was not guaranteed. Nearly 200 years later, Ronald Reagan warned that freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same. Nearly 30 years after that, President George W. Bush drove that point home much more succinctly, I might add, as is his style, in his second inaugural when he said, "America is a nation of citizens, not spectators." These leaders together have sent us a clear set of marching orders. While the American people as a whole are good, we know from history that those who are not angels are still out there. And from time to time, our fundamental values come under threat by those populists who push flawed policies of nativism, protectionism, and isolationism. These ideologies are short-sighted. They are not consistent with the values upon which this country's success has been achieved. Harry Truman said that the only thing new in the world is the history you don't know. And it seems like every 50 to 100 years, these philosophies get trotted out by societies again, even if they've been empirically proven to be wrong or dangerous. Throughout time, either through crises or otherwise, good people have risen to the occasion to defeat these forces of populism, and they go back into hibernation. History teaches us that regimes built upon fear do not last. At the Bush Center, we know we are on the right side of history, promoting economic opportunity, fiscal responsibility, social tolerance, strong domestic institutions, and knowing that the U.S., while not always getting it right, is still a force for good in the world. We not only defend these aspirational values, but we also work to show the world what they look like in practice. We're both a think tank and, as President Bush stresses, a do tank. We focus on ensuring opportunity for all, strengthening our democracy, and advancing free societies around the world. Ensuring opportunity for all means helping markets work for everyone, supported by a government that does fewer things, but does them well. It means promoting secure borders and responsible immigration policies that reflect our welcoming heritage and economic necessity. It means promoting literacy and education that serve every student. And it means seeing to it that our nation's veterans have the respect and support that they deserve. Strengthening our democracy means promoting pluralism and having uncomfortable conversations in a manner that honors, respects, and teaches. And we know that America can be strong at home, lead with our allies abroad, and respect the rule of law to advance freedom. We are unapologetic globalists who believe that leadership is our strength. When we retreat, vacuums are filled by those who want to hurt or undermine us. We treat our friends as friends, and we call out our adversaries. We could not be more blunt. It is in our national security and economic interest to be a global leader, supporting freedom, democracy, and using our soft power to rid the world of diseases like HIV/AIDS through the important PEPFAR program, and to support the young democracy Ukraine against the war criminal that invaded it. While our politics may have entered a questioning period, we at the Bush Center are confident in the American people as inclusive creative, aspiring, and an innovative bunch. We see that firsthand in our leadership programs that bring people from across the spectrum willing to work together to find solutions to pressing challenges. They are strengthening our democracy by putting their values into action. We see that in the tremendous response we get from all over the country to the Bush Institute's pragmatic policy work. Rest assured, it may not make headlines or viral tweets, but our work is noticed in the halls of influence where it really counts. As Dwight Eisenhower said, you don't lead by hitting people over the head. That's assault, not leadership. We believe in real leadership here. And our engagement agenda has brought our values to the public. As you know, this is my last time as CEO hosting this forum, as our board is hard at work locating my successor. We began this program in 2018 as a way to bring the world to the Bush Center and the Bush Center to the world. We have shared important and tough topics. We have created content viewed by hundreds of thousands of people around the world to highlight leadership and values. It has been the honor of a lifetime for me to share this stage with so many. Our conversations have included Bono, Jeff Bezos, Henry Kissinger, Jim Mattis, Indra Nooyi, Glenn Youngkin, Condi Rice, Bill Gates, Melinda French Gates, and President Bush, of course, and many others. This stage has become a prized piece of real estate that stands for something. It stands for freedom. It stands for opportunity. It stands for accountability, and it stands for compassion. And it stands for all this with civility, respecting the dignity of our fellow citizens and our constitutional principles. In short, it stands on the shoulders of President and Mrs. Bush. Principled, timeless leadership never goes out of style. Our forum today is structured around the American Promise, President Bush's first inaugural address in 2001, which had a call to action urging citizens to embrace the ideals of liberty, responsibility, and collective effort to secure a prosperous future. Consistent with that theme, today we will hear from immigrants who are making this country better, educators who care about the future, journalists who care about the dissemination of truth, and importantly, we'll hear directly from President Bush so that you all can have the benefit of what we get to see here every day. And to cap it off tonight at 7 o'clock at SMU's McFarland Auditorium, we'll have a conversation with Dallas's own Emmanuel Acho, who has mastered the art of uncomfortable conversations to promote common understanding. We built the agenda around an optimistic call to action. Today is a beginning, and it is our hope that we all leave today with a spring in our step, motivated to be citizens, not spectators. Thank you all for being here. And now it is my honor to kick off the first panel by introducing the Senior Vice President of Boeing Global Services, a company that has been a major investor and supporter and friend to the Bush Center. Please welcome William M. Pofo.
Thank you, Ken, and good morning, everyone. So I hope you had a wonderful evening last night, and looking forward to today, full agenda here. I just wanted to share a couple of opening remarks by way of introduction of our panelists here, but let me just first by saying, only in America can you pull yourself up from your bootstraps and go from being the son of a logger in rural Washington state to be the founder of what is now more than a 100-year-old aerospace company. That was Bill Boeing. Bill Boeing developed an interest in aviation while in college, an example of the American ideals of exploration and innovation. He took his first flight in 1910, and then 6 years later, he founded the Boeing Company, reflecting the American entrepreneurial spirit. Bill Boeing also laid the groundwork for a culture of philanthropy within the company, which partners with schools, provides mentorships with students in STEM, and encourages employees to give back to their communities in which we work and live. By engaging students in hands-on learning experiences and providing resources for their development, we are inspiring the next generation to believe that anyone, regardless of background, can do great things and achieve their dreams. I believe we all have a responsibility to uplift our communities, and I am fortunate to do that through mentoring, coaching, and philanthropic endeavors. As we hold to our core values and set examples in our communities, we demonstrate the importance not only in believing in yourself, but also setting goals and finding what inspires you. America is a beacon of opportunity. Achieving the American dream takes hard work, truly, perseverance, and passion. And success is often a shared journey by those wanting to do better, be better, and help others around them succeed. Today, we recognize the remarkable journeys of two individuals who exemplify the American dream and the American promise. This panel, entitled Only in America, will feature Daniel Lubetzky, the founder of Builders Movement and Kind, and also Salim Asrawi, the co-founder of president of Texas de Brazil. It will be moderated by Ann Wicks, the Don Evans Family Managing Director of Opportunity and Democracy at the George W. Bush Institute. So I'd like you all to join me in welcoming them to the stage.
I want her to be in the middle, but
He
she's
was trying to
insisting.
have good manners. Hi, everybody. Good morning. I am really excited for this conversation, delighted that we get to share it. As William was just explaining about this panel, Only in America, I'm so thrilled we have these two. I greatly admire these two men. They are entrepreneurs, CEOs. They also have a strong sense of civic purpose and what it means to build community. They also have great senses of humor, so I know you'll enjoy this. But when I think they're the perfect example of the kind of lives and leadership that happen only in America. It's sort of when you get this combination of opportunity plus freedom plus a sense of purpose and some hard work. When all that collides, you get Americans like these two. And we'll get a chance to hear a little bit about their perspective and their experience today. So both of them started life not in this country, were born elsewhere. So Salim, let's start with you. You were born in Lebanon. How does one get from Lebanon to becoming a Texan?
Well, when I was in Lebanon, we had a few channels on TV, and you'd have to play with the antenna a little bit. We had the show Dallas. And Dallas was amazing because big cars, cowboy hats, highways, tall buildings. And little did I know, in '81, I came to Bryan College Station.
Yeah.
'81 Bryan College Station was, the boonies. I mean, there was nothing there. It's great now. It's amazing. So I came and, coming to America, I went and got a cowboy hat, a belt buckle, my name on it. And I was in line in the supermarket one day, and somebody was tapping me on the back. It's like, what's that? And I'm like, what's what? And I said, that's my name. So I think I was the only Salim in Texas. So my mom dropped me off. I turned 14. I went to Luby's, all you can eat, great Jell-O selections. And little did I know, years later, I do an all you can eat as well. So that's kind of how it was from Lebanon to Bryan College Station.
I'm delighted to know that the show Dallas was the American product that drew you in. That's highbrow all the way. That's great. Daniel, would you tell us a little bit how your family went from Europe to Mexico to the U.S.?
Yeah, but I first have to say, Salim and I had a pre-connection call, and there's a lot that we have in common. But one thing we didn't have in common is the beginning of our arrival to school and to the United States, because he went and bought himself a cowboy hat. But when I arrived at Robert E. Lee High School in San Antonio, Texas, as a 16-year-old, the first thing I saw was these kids with hats holding this kid by the legs and the arms and ramming him into a post. And it was the initiation to become a kicker. And I'm like, I know I don't want to be a kicker. I didn't understand all the other social constructs because it was 1984 and it was kind of like the Breakfast Club. So they had the jocks and they had the New Agers and the debate kids and the drama kids, and I didn't really understand all of those things, but I knew that I wanted to not become initiated as a kicker. But maybe after the trauma of 40 plus years, maybe I'll go get that hat now. But my father, first of all, thank you for having me here, because I listened to Secretary Evans' benediction yesterday, and it was so touching, and the spirit of what President and Mrs. Bush bring to the world, the values that are so necessary in our world today. And I'm just so grateful to be here with this community. And honestly, that's what I arrived into in the United States, where I immigrated from Mexico. Prior to that, my connection to the United States was that my father had been liberated by American soldiers from the Dachau concentration camp. He was a little kid. The circumstances were very different, right? 15 and a half, I arrived to Robert E. Lee High School. 15 and a half, he is 6 foot tall and he weighs less than 70 pounds. And he's liberated by American soldiers. And after he recuperated and was in a hospital and then in a refugee camp, he went to Mexico, where he met my mom. And then, like all nice Jewish jokes, he and 4 other Holocaust survivors, this is actually not a joke, this is true, they all co-founded this duty-free business, duty-free, where they sold watches and televisions and perfumes on the border between Mexico and the United States. I ended up building a pretty successful business. And we moved to San Antonio. The headquarters were in Laredo, but my parents wanted us to be more like the cradle of civilization, so we went to San Antonio. I know Dallas, you guys are. And that's the beginnings.
Well, I want to go next to your entrepreneurial journey, and then we're going to talk about your civic purpose. But you're both entrepreneurs. This is a common theme, I think, for immigrants. I think I saw that nearly 50% of all Fortune 500 companies are founded by immigrants or children of immigrants in this country, which I think is pretty remarkable. What made it possible for you to build your business here? Why did you see a sense of possibility about building your business here? Daniel, do you want to start, or Salim?
I mean, opportunity. Only in this great country, hard work, determination is rewarded. Anybody can be somebody. And being an immigrant, seeing things how it is in your own country, having one opportunity, you want to make the most of it, and you don't want to go back. So, and you're a guest in this country. I always remember that. Even though I'm a citizen, I came here as a guest. I was embraced. And once you're given an opportunity, you do not want to waste that. So that's what it was for me. You know, and a lot of luck along the way, a lot of great people that helped me through my journey, and mentors, and I was able to do it.
There's a lot of things we take for granted that we shouldn't. One of them is that the free market that we benefit from and the rule of law, in many countries it doesn't exist. When I grew up in Mexico City, it was just absolutely not the same. And the opportunity to work hard and rise from merit still exists in the United States. And I know there's a ton of challenges, but like President Bush was talking about, was in a reception earlier, opportunity is what it's all about. And I always felt I was almost encouraged to try things even if I was going to fail. That's another thing we cannot take for granted. In many societies, you cannot take those risks because it's a shame if you fail. In the United States, it's a badge of honor, right? And in my journey, before Kind, had 10 years of failures, so a lot of badges of honor. And so I was, right after law school, I started a company called Peaceworks to use business as a force for bringing neighbors together. So I had ventures between Israelis, Palestinians, Jordanians, Egyptians, and Turks, making a iconically branded line called Moshe Pupik and Ali Mishmunken's world famous gourmet foods. I still don't know why it failed. And then we started a bunch of other Peaceworks ventures all over the world. But after 10 years of mistakes in the food space, I kind of developed a little bit of pattern recognition, and I had the idea for what became Kind, and then that one finally worked.
And a much shorter name.
Yeah, well, that's how we learned to keep it short.
Well, you also have an interesting side hustle now as an investor on Shark Tank. I think we may have a photo of you on set, but I thought that was interesting that you're now choosing to invest in entrepreneurs in this way. What's that experience been like?
It's a lot of fun. It's the one show where, as you can tell, I like to talk. When we finish every panel, I feel like I invaded, and like Salim says, I feel like a guest. And now I'm a regular, but I still don't want to interrupt too much. And the producer's like, "You need to give us more." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" It was like it's very hard because you have other 4 sharks trying to get their words in and get the deals, and it's an interesting ecosystem where you really do create an artificial sense of a real competition, and it actually is a real competition. And it's intellectually stimulating because you need to try to keep up with the stuff. But above all, it's a really great opportunity to not just help the entrepreneurs on the stage, but there's millions and millions of generations, grandparents, parents, and kids watching and learning about the entrepreneurial system and learning about entrepreneurship, which is really one of our secret sauces.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened when I watched with my 10-year-old son. He was like, "What's going on?"
And I pause when I was watching with my kids. I drive them nuts. I don't know if you guys pause on all the movies, but like, "Dad, stop pausing!" But I pause to explain things, and like, we know it, but like, I asked them like about what is this company valued at if this is the offer, and so they learned a little bit.
Yeah. That must be a treat for them. Yeah.
They love it.
Yeah. Salim, we were chatting backstage. You have long been a supporter of veterans, and that is how you met President Bush, which then became you being painted by President Bush for his book of paintings on immigrants, Out of Many One. What was that experience like? I think we have the painting, yes, of you being the subject of a former president.
Yeah, I mean, so orange, I think orange was popular back then. I don't think it's, popular now, the color orange. But just real quick, I met him, I met President Bush officially in Santa Barbara, California. We were at a dinner table with the head of the school, Christian school, and everybody at the table got their questions in. I mean, after all, 2-time president, China, Russia, etc. And my wife is next to me, and she'll kick me once I talk too much. But then they got nervous. Nobody was speaking. I mean, I don't know if President Bush was intimidating that day or the Secret Service was just staring at him. But then him and I were talking about nothing. And all of a sudden, in the middle of conversation, he goes, "I hate tattoos. Do you have tattoos?" And now my wife is under the table, embarrassed. And I go, "Well, I have a Bible verse. I have this. I have that." So I became the Lebanese guy with tattoo. Fast forward to the Warrior Open. And, every event, you're in line to take a picture. I always look forward to take one with Mrs. Bush, but since President Bush is next to her, we do it, the 3 of us together. So I'm like 20 deep, and we make eye contact.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden he goes, "I've been looking for you, come over here." And I'm like, shoot, what does he want from me? So I come over and he goes, "I'm doing a book about immigrants and you're gonna do your biography." And then he starts yelling at Grant. Grant is here, our famous photographer.
Yeah.
There you are. And Grant come over, now President Bush is the director, and he's telling me, "Look up, look down, this, that, etc." And then, I'm a restaurant guy. I don't pause shows like you. So my brain is not thinking fast enough, and I'm like, he wants to paint me. I'm gonna be staring at him, and the Secret Service is staring at me. How the heck is that gonna work? But thank God, once Grant started taking pictures, then my slow brain said, "Oh, he's gonna do it over that." And now the painting thing, I think, it was a mix-up. He should have painted you. You're more handsome, Daniel. But I'll take it. I mean, one thing to be painted by a President Bush, that was amazing. And going back to veterans.
But just 1 second, I think it's the audience.
I'm going 1,000 miles an hour. I'm looking at the clock, 22:03:02, so I'm speeding up.
But I think the audience wants to know this because this is not, the infamous series from President Bush and the nudes, the Salim nudes. This is not that Salim. He was fully clothed. He had, I think, just the third button down. But other than that, there was, right? That was the different
I mean, thank God. What if he wanted to paint nude portraits? We can't say no to the president. And by the way, Out of Many One is sold in the gift shop here. Please make sure you buy a copy. After all, President Bush is unemployed, and you know, he'll need all the proceeds that he can. So going back to veterans, I support many causes, children, veterans. Let me just say one thing. This is a great country because of their selflessness and sacrifice. They volunteer to serve. I would not be in this great country. Daniel will not be in this great country if it wasn't for their service, because freedom is not free. So when I think about that, I think of them.
One of my colleagues had said, I wish you luck moderating this panel with these two. So I think you proved her point. All right, so Daniel, I'm going to read you something that you wrote that I was really struck by, and I'd like for you to tell us a little bit about.
Connected to the Salim nudes, or?
No, it is not. I'm pivoting explicitly. Okay. You wrote, when extremists get out of bed, they ask themselves, how can I advance my cause? Meanwhile, most ordinary citizens wake up and ask themselves, what can I have for breakfast? So what is your charge to all of us ordinary citizens, and what have you created with builders?
Yeah, so many years ago in the Middle East, following Peaceworks, I also co-founded with a friend of mine, Mohammed Darausha, a movement called One Voice. And our work already 25 years ago was about recognizing that the vast majority of citizens are moderate, but a tiny minority of extremists hijack the agenda, and our goal was to try to awaken moderates to seize back the agenda away from terror and extremism on any side. It was an imperfect model. We made a lot of impact. Actually, we were credited with the 2008 Annapolis peace process for bringing it back, and by building a movement of close to 1 million Israelis and Palestinians to create the conditions for President Bush's administration to make progress on that. But one of the things that we got wrong and that we're trying to fix here for America is that it's not enough to be a moderate. You need to take action. And in our culture, we tend to expect for somebody else to do it for us. We want leaders. We're always like, there's no leaders. And it's almost kind of like an excuse to look for somebody else to be the hero. And we need to understand that we need to be the heroes. We need to be the people that seize back the agenda every single day and that shape the world the way that we want it to look like. And we're living through a time across the world and in our nation and in our state where there's a lot of threats and a lot of dangers, that a lot of the things that we take for granted, a lot of the values that we cherish are under threat, and we cannot wait for others to do it for us. So this is the Builders Movement. We started it several years ago, but only recently we decided that we're gonna focus on Texas as our proving battleground to demonstrate that we can, again, not just be moderates trying to fight off extremism, but be builders trying to fend off destroyers and destruction. The difference is an extremist that wakes up in the morning and takes action to divide, demolish, and diminish is a destroyer. A citizen who takes action to unite, to build, to bring light to the world, that's a builder. They can build bridges, they can build schools, they can build jobs, they can build opportunities for our society. And we all, in how we relate to one another, and how we open the door, how we look at each other's eyes, in how we treat people with kindness, with respect, how we reward opportunity and hard work, we can all be builders in every single moment of every single day of our lives. And we have to build that movement to consciously also make sure that the elected politicians understand that the will of the people is to solve problems rather than to create troubles, rather than dividing our country, to try to unite our country with solutions. And so in Texas, we're gonna try to ensure that the builders' ethos works in media, education, and civics. In media, we already have a set of social media channels that have generated over 3.5 million followers and over 1 billion views. And we're just gonna double down on that, trying to not tell people what to think, but with tools on how to think, with a builder's mindset, with curiosity, compassion, creativity, courage, the 4 C's of our builder's mindset that are essential for us, that are what help me build kind, that are what help us build great societies and enterprises and families, to approach people with a little bit of humility, without thinking that we have all the answers, trying to seek to learn and understand from one another, to understand where the other person's coming from, with a lot of the words of Secretary Evans from yesterday. And so we're trying to inject that in media. We're working with curricula and best practices to inject it in K-12 programs and universities. And then in terms of civics, we have 2 very important programs to try to make sure that politicians are gonna follow the will of builders rather than destroyers and extremists, which is, one of them is called Citizen Solutions, where we have a methodology to help citizens across a broad spectrum of politics to come up with solutions. Because on almost all of these issues that are used as wedges to divide us, 80% of citizens can agree on 80% of issues. And so we want to demonstrate that. We did a pilot in Tennessee where on gun rights and gun safety, a group of Tennesseans came up with 8 proposals across a spectrum of politics. They had a Second Amendment absolutist, self-proclaimed absolutist, and an inner city school teacher who had lost 2 kids to gun violence. And when they met and we started working over 6 months, they were like, there's no chance we're getting any progress. 6 months later, they had 8 proposals. Those 8 proposals were presented to Tennesseans. 30,000 citizens participated in giving shape to them, and 5 of them met majority consensus, and 1 of them already turned into legislation. It's already passed legislation, and then the citizens are now feeling a sense of ownership, and with that power comes the responsibility for them to propel their political representatives to follow the will of the people. We're going to try to demonstrate that we can do that here in Texas. We're in the process of polling where do the majority of Texans stand on most of these issues, and what are the ones that are most important to them. And wherever the gaps are, we're going to, both at the city level and at the state level, try to guide politicians to do what the people want and to solve problems. And then there's the last one, which is a builder's scorecard, where we're going to track how politicians are talking, speaking, acting, where are they working on legislation that's actually solving our problems rather than just tearing us apart. And then we're going to publish that data, and we're going to create a slate so that whether it's Democrat, Republican, or Independent, we're completely nonpartisan. We're just going to try to show you which of the Republicans, which of the Democrats, and which of the Independents are acting as builders and which as destroyers, give them a score, and then empower citizens to try to change the incentives in the system. Because today, you benefit from being an extremist. You raise more money, you get more attention, the primary participation is suppressed, all the gerrymandering makes all of these districts almost non-competitive. So we need to change that by getting more citizens to vote in the primaries and to get involved.
I love so much about what you just described, and in part because I worry, one of the worries I have is that democracy is becoming like a spectator sport, like a reality TV show where crazy things happen and we sort of watch it and then move on. And it's really, it requires intense participation. You are both fathers, and I'm wondering what you tell your kids about the responsibilities of citizenship. Salim, I'll start with you. How do you talk to your kids, and what do you hope young people know about?
I mean, going back, I love what you're doing, by the way. You could have done nothing, but I think as a citizen, you have civic duties, and each one of us can make the world better by being kind. Start with that. But I want to wake up one day where Daniel is my friend, Anne is my friend, versus my Jewish friend, my black friend, my Asian friend, my Arab friend. We're one people. You know, we live in this great country, and it's the people that make a country great. So I think, and you're going to have a panel on education later here, we can't put enough emphasis on education. Kids need to have a good education. We need to empower our teachers, and we need to pay them better. Because it all starts with that. So the family needs to get involved, a place of worship. They need involvement, and we need to make citizens involved in the community. They make the difference in the community. So to my kids, and I have many, I have twins and triplets, we're very blessed. Nobody invites us over to their home because we're too many. I mean, imagine all 7 of us at a dinner table. But I think we want kids to develop their own personality and be who they want to be. But I think you start with showing them the love and the kindness and coexisting, with others, and looking someone in the eye. Mrs. Bush, all the pictures that she's taking over the years, when the boys came over here, one of the boys shook her hands and didn't look her in the eye. She corrected him, So it's little things like that you take on a daily basis to just make not just your kids, but everybody around you better. Every day, all of us can do so many things. So some of us give money, which is great. Some of you give time, sending a cookie, but to someone's home. But more importantly, it's just be a lady or a gentleman, shake someone's hand, look them in the eye, thank them, ask them how their day is, versus just barging in and going. You're a CEO of a company, which I think is great. You didn't get to where you want to be without hard work. When is the last time you had lunch in the, I don't know what you call it now, employee break room, cafeteria? When was the last time you sat with an hourly employee and asked them how they're really doing, how their family is? So a little compassion goes a long way.
Daniel, what would you add to that? What are you telling your kids?
I mean, I'll just take it a slightly different direction too, because everything Salim said, I really enjoyed it, and I agree. He and I are very similar, and I'm a pop psychologist. Salim grew up in Lebanon, in a war-torn country, and he observed stuff. I didn't grow up in war, but I absorbed it from hearing what my father went through. And so we are both eternal bridge builders. And I notice that in every choice he makes, in how he talks, in how he relates to stuff, he's always building bridges. And for us, I'm analyzing myself as a neurotic Mexican Jew who, we're always living to prevent what happened to our parents and others from happening again to other people. And so that's what I think, feel the urgency of building bridges. We need to understand that everyone sitting in this room, that everybody in America needs to understand that it can happen here too, and that the course of our nation over the last 5, 10, 15 years, with greater division by any standard, with greater dehumanization, with greater threats against the rule of law, with greater intimidation from the far left and from the far right, we cannot just, like you said, be bystanders. We need to lean in against it and say, enough. We're going to defend all of the things that we are so blessed to have, and we're going to bring it forward. And we are the overwhelming majority of Americans. And by the way, Republicans and Democrats and independents, you look at the data and you actually ask them, what are the things that matter to you? And the overwhelming majority agree on all of the same values, but they don't think that the other side does. They've been told that the other side doesn't agree, but both the progressives and the conservatives care about helping the needy. Both progressives and conservatives think that nobody should be above the law. Both progressives and conservatives care about freedom, democracy, respect, kindness. We just need to find a way to start uniting for those things.
I just want to add something to what he said about the Holocaust. Mm-hmm. And if you have not been, I've been to a Holocaust museum in Berlin, and it was really, countries sat on the sideline. That is shameful when all of this happened. North Korea, President Bush Joseph Kim is a fellow here. President Bush painted him. Joseph, if you're in the audience, can you please stand up? I can't see you. The lights are so bright.
I think he is he? Oh.
So, you know, if it wasn't, I mean, my God, his story. But again, we're sitting, I mean, the Bush Center does a lot for human freedom, North Korea. Joseph's story is amazing. There are people, as we speak, in North Korea that are starving, and countries are sitting on the sideline. So we can do more as a society. I think everybody that lives in a free society has an obligation to do more. And I think it's one thing listening on TV, it's another thing hearing a story face to face. And Joseph, I love you. By the way, he's at Harvard now. I mean, from North Korea to the Bush Center to Harvard. So it's just amazing. Sorry, I didn't even know what you were going to ask.
No, but I loved it. I loved
Thank
it.
you.
And we love Joe. Okay, in our last few minutes here, I wanted to ask you both two questions. Number one, quickly to talk about decision making. So President Bush wrote a book about decision points, about decisions he made in his presidency that sort of takes us into how do you navigate that as a leader when you've got really complex situations and how you make decisions. And I'd love to hear a little bit from each of you about what you've learned about decision making in your career. Daniel, I'll start with you.
Well, I mean, I have so many thoughts. I'll share one or two. One thing is that the more you succeed, the more you have the danger of thinking that you have the answers. And you need to try to stay grounded. My biggest tool is my wife and my children because they remind me that I'm a putz. But I also at work surround myself with people that are comfortable calling me out. I've noticed CEOs in companies that I admire a lot, but they get surrounded by people that are just telling them what they want to hear. Mm-hmm. And you can mark the moment when that organization is going to become mediocre, where people are afraid to speak. This is a super important thing in America. When I arrived in the United States in 1984, President Reagan was the president then, and I was stunned to see late night television hosts make fun of him. And I was offended because as a Mexican that didn't have that freedom, I'd been programmed to, I'd rationalized my lack of freedom as, oh, it's disrespectful to speak out against any elected representative. That's what I had been told, and I believed it. And so it took me a while to deprogram myself. In Saudi Arabia, in China, in Russia, they tell themselves those things, that it's disrespectful to criticize leaders. In the United States, you can say whatever you want to say. And it's such an incredible gift. And by the way, what I loved about the United States is that they would criticize each other, but then afterwards, President Reagan and Tip O'Neill would go for dinner and would be friends. And they would vehemently disagree on the issues, but they would respect each other. And that's our secret sauce. That is the secret ingredient of what makes America great. It's not just the democracy, the freedom, and all of those liberties that we have, but the fact that the oil that lubricates the machinery of democracy is the kindness and the respect that we have towards one another. That's what makes things work. That's why our legislature, historically, they don't start punching each other as they do in other legislatures. And so a lot of it is about being able to speak up, but to disagree with respect. Mm-hmm. Builders did a campaign with the National Governors Association about that topic, about how to learn to disagree better. And what I find very dangerous right now is that people are more and more scared to listen to one another, to seek other things, or to even speak up and share their opinions. It is super dangerous. It started happening with the far left, with cancel culture, and people being intimidated to speak up. That's probably what brought in President Trump and the far right, because they at least had the courage to not be intimidated by the far left. By now, the far right and President Trump punching down, and I know that I'm not supposed to bring in politics here, but I don't care. No, I'm joking. It's important for us to talk about these issues. Now punching down is so dangerous because it intimidates people. And what's more dangerous than censorship from the government? Self-censorship. Because the censorship from the government is imperfect, but if you're scared and you censor yourself, then it spreads much, much faster. For the first time since I immigrated to the United States, I'm hearing people scared to speak up. For the first time since I came to this amazing country, I hear people in government, they don't want to prosecute a crime because it might be a friend of a friend and they might get in trouble or they might get fired. They don't want to speak up about an issue that they disagree because their business will suffer. You see people intimidated. It is super dangerous. It's very quickly we can lose that incredible gift we have. And so we need to all be comfortable speaking up and defending our values.
All right, Salim, we have a minute left, so we'll give you the last word.
I agree with everything Daniel said. Let's go. No, I'm just kidding. I think you have to be honest with yourself. You know, you have to be approachable. You have to have a set of plans, but able to have plan B and plan C. You know, success all depends on the people that work with you, not work for you. And also, whatever you do, it's how you coexist with the community, how you coexist with other businesses and leaders, and you're part, you know, of that community, and you really promote within, teach, educate, and hold people accountable. Being honest with them is telling them all the good and all the bad, but the core values, the hard work, the determination, the honesty, you know, is, you know, or President Bush's book, Decision Points. You can go read it. It's everything and more in it.
Well, thank you. I'm grateful to have you both as Texans and Americans who are employing a lot of people, lots of happy customers, and doing important leadership in our community. I'm really grateful. Thank you for being here. Please join me in thanking our guests.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the founder and CEO of the Complete Solution Group, Sandra Ambatate.
Good morning. In 2000, my family and I won a lottery so big it completely transformed our lives. I know what some of you are thinking. Sandra, how many millions did you get? Well, what if I told you we did not get $1, not a penny? But that was the day when I felt the wealthiest I have ever been. My family and I won a diversity green card lottery, a chance to start fresh in a country that is built by immigrants, shaped by dreamers, a place where anything seemed possible. I was born in Lithuania under the Soviet Union, where life was very simple. That's me in pigtails and that picture standing next to my mom. Life was not only simple, the opportunities were very limited. Resources were scarce, and we just didn't dream too much. But our hardships in the family go a little bit further than that. My grandparents were forcibly sent away to Kazakhstan in the late 1950s. That's when my mother was born in exile. The culture of suppression has taught us not to question things, not to talk too much, not to dream too big, if to even dream at all. And that mindset lingered for generations to come. My worldview, was shaped in the shadows of the Soviet Union. And not until my teenage years, well after Lithuania gained its independence and the Soviet Union collapsed, that I was introduced to the American dream through the pop culture. I did not watch the Dallas show. Instead, I watched Saved by the Bell. I used to dream about owning my own locker, the cute little posters, all the decorations in there, just like in that show. I also used to dream about owning my own car and cruising down the California coast with my windows down, blasting radio on full blast, and singing to J-Lo and Aerosmith songs. I was dreaming of a country where anything was possible, where I can be whoever I put my mind into. And in spring of 2000, everything has changed. I still remember the morning when my sister and I discovered a large envelope addressed from the United States of America. I remember that spring morning. It was a sunny day. My mom walks into the room and says, "Girls, are you ready to move to America?" We jumped up and down, hearts bursting in joy, and that's when I knew that our American dream is about to begin. A year after moving to the United States, I finally got my own locker. But it wasn't like the one in Saved by the Bell. It was in boot camp at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. I joined the military in 2003 without speaking any English. Boot camp was fun. And so I thought the Army was the only branch. I still kind of think that, but that might be a conversation for another time. I stepped in a world I didn't truly understand. I was surrounded by strangers who came from different backgrounds that soon became my best friends and my extended family that to this day, almost 20 years later, I can call and count on even today. I found purpose, unity, and belonging. I knew that the military was going to be my lifelong career. I loved it. I loved the camaraderie, I loved the discipline, and I wanted to stay in for way more than 20 years. But as you know, sometimes life throws challenges at us. Things don't go according to the plan. I was in a tragic motorcycle accident that left me nearly paralyzed. It ended my career very earlier than I expected, and I was crushed. I was devastated. I had no idea what I was going to do next. The military was all I knew, and I was so good at it. And after a few years of the recovery, I finally found new purpose. For the last decade, I've been working with transitioning service members, helping them in their transition, figuring out life after the military. I found new mission, and I realized that I can continue serving my country even after I take my uniform off. In the last year, I was honored to be accepted into the Bush Institute Stand to Veteran Leadership Program, a program that was not just an incredible experience, but a program that also pushed me to dream even further, to accomplish even more. And also the program where once again I found that belonging and unity. Recently, I launched my own company to support not just the military community, but also the law enforcement agencies and organizations that work tirelessly to keep our communities and our country safe. This time, I'm not just joining diverse teams, I'm actually building them. I want to be the reason why we collaborate and that everyone has a seat at the table. So my message today is let's stop isolating. We've gotten too comfortable in silos, us versus them, wrong versus right. We must collaborate. We must listen and learn from each other's different perspectives. Strength truly lies in the ability to see value in someone else's story or idea, even though if it challenges your own. So my challenge today to you, as you leave this room and you travel back home, talk to someone who comes from a different background, who might see the view just a little bit different than you, or someone who's got a silly accent like me and just sounds a little bit different. Shake hands instead of pointing fingers. Let's build bridges instead of walls. Let's bring back unity, compassion, and patriotism, not just in times of crisis, but in everyday life. I came to this country as a hopeful teenager who was dreaming of her own locker and pop songs. And here I am today, standing in front of you as an example of the American promise. Someone who's shaped by service, strengthened by setbacks, and driven by the belief that together we can accomplish anything in a country full of possibilities. Thank you. And now I would like to introduce the next panel who will be here to discuss higher education and democracy. Please welcome Dr. Ben Sasse, Dr. Gerald Turner, Dr. Melva Wallace, and the moderator, Robin Berkley.
Hi, good morning. Well, our session today is on higher education and democracy, so very little to hear about today. We were struggling to think about what to talk about. I did have the pleasure of sitting next to Senator Sasse during the last panel, and we have a little challenge going to see if he can somehow bring the conversation back to portrait nudes. Yep.
She wasn't kidding. Like,
No,
I've
it's
been offered money, so I'm sorry, Mrs. Bush, if a few too many times I go to your husband's painting talent.
Oh, President Wallace, President Turner, Senator Sasse, thank you so much for being here. You all have had such remarkable careers, have had such important contributions to higher ed, and really different experiences, so we're so lucky to be able to hear from you today. Before we jump in, President Wallace, would love to hear from you about your experience as a presidential leadership scholar. You were part of the class of 2016. And for those of you who may not know, PLS is a program that is run in partnership by the George W. Bush Center, the Clinton Foundation, the George and Barbara Bush Foundation, and the LBJ Foundation. The goal of which is to support participants in gaining the skills necessary to work across divides and to build a network that spans geographic, professional, political, and economic divides. So I wonder if you might share just a little bit about how that experience really impacted your role as a leader as an institutional of higher ed.
Absolutely. It was an honor of a lifetime. You summed it up. When you think about bringing people from all walks of life together to center themselves around their work. People from different backgrounds, different worlds coming together, and it was an honor to be selected as one of the 60 participants in that 2016 class. That particular class, what's really cool about the PLS program is that you also have an opportunity to bring forth a project that you want to bring to life, and mine was the Higher Education Leadership Foundation, which is a similar model to PLS, but it trains higher education leaders to do this work that we get to do all the time. So I was truly honored to have the opportunity to engage with President Bush, President Clinton, and then Daddy Bush, as we affectionately called him behind his back. I don't know if people called him that too. But it was truly, truly an honor of a lifetime.
Well, that is wonderful, and thank you for sharing. If you want to learn more about the PLS program, you can find information on our website. You can also see a video of President Wallace talking more about her experience. So with that, I'm going to shift us to the subject of democracy and higher education. I think it's fair to say that even to the most casual observer, you're aware that higher education has been making some pretty major headlines lately. For decades, our country's system of higher education really has been the pride of our nation. We've had the best talent, the best universities, the best research, and they've also played a role in shaping how many of our world's leaders, and as well as many of us in this room, think about and understand our society and democracy. But higher education has also faced a number of challenges that appear to be really driving it towards a turning point. There's declining enrollment, there's been campus protests across the country, and a growing political fight about the very ideals that have governed the decision-making of higher education. The conversation about the role of higher education in democracy has never been more poignant. So with that, we're going to get into all of those issues and more, but why don't we start off with the big picture and hear from this incredible panel. President Turner, I wonder if you could start us off and share a little bit about what you see as higher education's role and primary responsibility in fostering democratic values and civil discourse among students in this rapidly changing era.
Obviously, right now is about as volatile a time as I can remember. And for those of you that are not old enough to remember the Vietnam era, and the 60s, when you're worried about drafts and all those sort of things, there's nothing to compare with it. And so I think it's important that both sides of this, those that are most critical and the universities too, understand that that always there's change that's possible. And certainly the amount of funding that have gone into higher ed, anytime you do that, you probably do get a little sloppy at times. And so reanalyzing exactly how funding is spent is, I think, always necessary. And so I think anybody that claims that every dollar is spent well, really doesn't know how their budget's run. And so one of the things that I think is really important right now, though, is that we don't underestimate the importance of research and science in areas that don't don't immediately have vocational implications. Basic science, the kinds of things that eventually lead to something really important. And two, the United States is in a very difficult position right now in higher ed, in that when you look in STEM areas, basic sciences, engineering, and so on, a huge percentage of those students are international. And the United States has really fallen behind in math and science and so on in K through 12. And so as a result, we depend on that. We depend on being able to get them. But the idea that are all equally positive and so on, the answer is no. Do the universities have a responsibility to try to teach students how to talk to each other and how to work with each other? The answer is absolutely yes. And all of the things that go into making a real positive student affairs area, working with the faculty and so on, I think are just really important. We talk to our students all the time. Every time there's an issue that comes up, we bring the groups that are with that issue into my office and talk to them. One time in 2020, there was a group that said they were going to march in and take over my office. And I called up the student that was involved with it, and I said, "Why are you going to march on my office? Won't you come on in?" I've got a boardroom that seats 25. And so literally, this was right at the beginning of a lot of responses and concerned about racial issues and so on. And we met with that group every 2 weeks for 1 year.
That's remarkable.
For about an hour, sometimes more than an hour. I basically met with them until they calmed down and would talk. Because I believe you got to get a little catharsis and then you can deal with the issue.
That's great.
I agree with what Gerald has said. In addition, I think it's useful to put the decline of trust in higher education in the broader context of declining trust in institutions more broadly. If you look at Pew and Gallup data for 5 consecutive decades, if you look at the 10 largest sectors of the U.S. economy, 10 sectors, 5 decades, all 5 decades, 9 of the 10 sectors have had declining public trust. The only outlier is the military. You go from the 80s to the 90s to the aughts to the teens to the present. 9 of 10 sectors have had declining public trust, but higher education has had the steepest fall off in the last 15 years. If you go from 2015 to 2019 to 2023, you basically had a 10+% decline in higher ed's trust. From 57% of the public in 2015 thinking higher education is on net useful, to today only about 30% of the public thinks that higher ed is useful. And so there's a whole bunch of stuff we have to unpack inside what Gerald's saying about anybody who claims that all budgeting is done well in higher ed and doesn't know the process or isn't telling the truth. But more broadly, we have to look at this question of why the public distrusts institutions, and we need to unleash a phase of Tocquevillianism for the digital era. For America to work, you need to be building lots and lots of new institutions, and we aren't doing that right now in American life, and higher education looks like a sector that's particularly calcified.
I wonder, Senator, if you might be able to expand on that a bit more. I had actually planned to ask you this very question in a few minutes. So the confidence is low, and you've sort of named part of the problem. How do you think that institutions can go about restoring that trust?
Well, I mean, I think those of us who love President and Mrs. Bush and love what you've been building, Ken and team at the Bush Center, love the optimism about how this place and the culture of this place works. I think we need to have both, what was your phrase, aspirational realism. I think we need to recognize that when you went from the agrarian era to the industrial era, from 1870 to 1920, by 19-teens and 20s, America was a pretty great place again. But in the 1870s, 1880s, 1890s, not much seemed like it worked institutionally because we lived agrarian and now we were urbanizing. We were creating new cities and we hadn't built new institutions. I think we're going through a bigger revolution right now. 100 years from now, when you look back on our moment, I don't think you're really going to talk much about our politics. I think you're going to talk about the fact that we were the first people ever who went from parents and grandparents who all had lifelong work to kids and grandkids who are never going to have lifelong work in any one firm or any one sector again. We're going to need to create a civilization of lifelong learners. The vast majority of everybody who's come before us worked with atoms. The vast majority of everybody who comes after us is going to do work that's primarily around bits. And we don't know what it looks like to live in a digital hybrid era. We're never going to go back to a world that's all local, place-based. And also in Silicon Valley, we have a bunch of drunk fools saying we're going to upload our consciousness to the internet, and people are going to become indifferent. We're going to ultimately become exclusively digital beings. That's not true. We make babies, we break bread together, we need hugs. People need community, and yet our consciousness, because of the supercomputers we all walk around with, transcend the one time and place we're at. And we haven't built institutions yet that acknowledge what a digital hybrid life looks like. And I think higher ed's going to have to be at the forefront of figuring out what it looks like to help create lifelong learners. And right now we haven't sold that vision to the public yet.
And I want to disconnect two things, the trust and who's going. I've never met a parent that when their kids said that they were going to college, they were like, oh no, not college, not that place, what the hell, I'm like, are you serious? I mean, I've just never met that. So, the trust, do we have a trust issue? Yeah, but do you want your kids to go? Yes. And do you know the reality of going to college, especially at an HBCU? Huston-Tillotson University is an HBCU, a historically black college and university. So people who look like me believe that institutions of higher education are important, they're impactful, they help you get to the next place, and they help you get high wage, high demand jobs. And that's our job. So the answer is, should we, as higher education leaders, take a responsibility in ensuring that democracy is taught? Absolutely. We also need to teach them soft skills. In our university, we don't just send students out into the world with degrees, but we also want them to have team building, time management, conflict resolution, the things that matter most. And so it is our job to do a lot of things. We're running small cities. We're running small cities within a city. Yeah. And so it is our responsibility to ensure that students that come into our world, our little bubble for that 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, however long they want to stay, and that it is our opportunity at that time to ensure that they get everything. And it's not just the accounting degree, it's not just the education degree, because we are training students to go back into the workplace, to be wise, caring leaders.
I love that. As a mom of 2 boys in college who are in New Orleans, so when they told me they were going to college,
Louisiana?
I said, great. When they said New Orleans, I was like, oh. Right. And 4 years. We're going to finish in 4 years, not 8 years. Yes. But getting to this human connection and this development, and knowing that when you have these young adults, their brain is still developing, right? We have until 26, which, as a mom of 2 boys, 26. Is really encouraging.
28, 29, 30.
So I wonder, President Wallace, if you could just expand a little bit. I would love for you to share a little bit about those formative experiences that kids are having on college campus, connecting with students who have different backgrounds, different beliefs, how you've seen that change, and what is it that they're looking for? What do they want? And how do they approach democracy in society? How are they thinking about it?
I would say that right now that there is a real challenge, because as higher education leaders, my student affairs staff, my dean of students, faculty, we're teaching civic discourse, and we're saying, how might we have conversations? How might we speak to one another kindly? And then there's the world. And so then there's our example. It's the do as I say and not as I do. So we're really struggling with that right now because we're saying it is your chance. You're going to have an opportunity to get this right because many of us, maybe we don't have it right. But I am encouraging our students to not wait until they cross the stage and shake my hand, to participate in these exercises and to have a voice, but to start now and to start on campus. And so we're seeing challenges with that as we're saying, start now, get involved, get engaged in these conversations. And they are. And many of our colleagues are, are being tasked with reeling that in or working with students to be. I'm in the yearbook. I tell the students, I'm in the Grambling State University yearbook protesting the calf. I was sitting in the middle of the street with my friends and we had our legs crossed and we were mad about the hours of the cafeteria. And I have a face, the yearbook has me scowled, upset about those hours. And so I think they have to see us as leaders in these reality moments where, like my friend Gerald says, talking to students, come into our office so that we can show you how to have these courageous conversations.
We start during the orientation for students really working on this and talking about civil discourse, freedom of speech, civil discourse, and how you go about interacting with each other. We Maria Dixon Hall on our staff developed a cultural intelligence term. So what you become intelligent about all cultures and all backgrounds and so on. And it's a good language to use. You don't get into a lot of the diversity and those kinds of things issues, but it's what needs to happen, and that is to know how to understand and work with each other. And then basically to have opportunities for students to debate one way or the other and one side or the other, but mainly to talk with each other. And so we have, in our student union, we have tables that groups kind of take over. And we work real hard to have a table that's on one side of an issue, table with another side of the issue on the other, maybe two tables down, and then trying to get them to kind of go back and forth some. And so it's work, but at the same time, the students have to see how civil discourse is really, no matter who doesn't do it at whatever office, it's still the basic human way to interact, and that life is better, life is more enjoyable, and so on, if you respect each other and talk to each other rather than screaming or yelling at each other.
I think if you did kind of a 2x2 of teaching versus research, humanities versus STEM, and you rank ordered what the public had confidence and disconfidence in, I think it's weird that going through this moment where the federal government is talking about cutting a lot of research dollars to the STEM side of institutions where there's actually quite a bit of public support, because I think where a lot of the public lack of confidence comes from is simultaneously in that we don't have enough rigor around our teaching in STEM. Gerald's point about, we have a lot of immigrant students who are doing amazing math and science work, and we have a lot of native-born American kids who haven't been pushed enough to do that. My kids are 23, 21, and 13, and one of mine's graduating from Harvard this year, and their average GPA now is over a 3.8. That's absurd.
Yeah.
Like that, if you disaggregate it, it's about 3.65 in the STEM disciplines, and it's about 3.9 in a lot of humanities. And parents who see that, and if you look at the University of Chicago academically adrift literature, there's been about a 60% reduction in the demand of most students' educational program over the last 30 years. People are rightly upset. Why does it take 4.5, 5.5 years to graduate when we're not pushing our kids hard enough? There are outliers to this, but by and large, there's not enough rigor. And inside a lot of our traditional humanities classes, we don't take ideas seriously enough. There's too much monoculture, ideological advocacy, where students don't get to have a great seminar experience where you say, hey, I might have to debate the other side of this same topic in history or literature or philosophy in the next seminar. And so we need to prize great teaching better inside the seminar format classes as well.
That's great. Well, we've touched on this a little bit, but I want to go ahead and address what I think is probably front of mind for a lot of us, which is that There are a number of institutions, I think at last count it was around 60, that have received notice that is part of a federal effort to eradicate anti-Semitic harassment on college campuses. They could lose or have frozen federal research funding unless they meet a list of demands, which include submitting audits of their admissions and hiring practices, putting academic departments on outside oversight, and reporting foreign students with conduct violations. Universities have had very different responses, from agreeing to comply to most recently a number of very public refusals and protests. What do you make of this ongoing conflict? What are you watching for? What are you thinking about as these situations unfold? President Turner, why don't we start with you?
I'm alarmed by some of the things that were demanded of Harvard. I mean, for you to do a survey of all faculty, staff, and students to find out what their attitudes are, where you can then go in and deal with their attitudes. The whole, if somebody's too strange and so on, that eventually works its way out. But you've got to be able to, you got to be able to work with people from all different kinds of backgrounds. My worry in all of this is that we are in the cutbacks that most of the, so much of the money for research goes into graduate students and postdocs. And they're the ones that do the real work under the oversight of a, as I call them, a research don, somebody who oversees a bunch of them. And so as a result, you've got those situations like that really, if you don't fund them, they're going to go somewhere else. I know right now, if you read anything in higher ed, Australia and New Zealand are benefiting from the Chinese and Indonesian and all those kinds of people coming in. Germany, France, and Britain are really benefiting from those that would be more Turkey and Eastern European, have a lot of science students in the United States. And so it's just going to build them up. There's got to be a way to find a way to have some rational medium, both on expenditures and on issues about social concerns, to find a way to work through this. I mean, I keep hoping that it'll be resolved, and it has to be, because the key to the science and health success of this country is based upon our incredible medical centers and so on, and the research that they have. And you read each one of them, and they're looking at huge cuts that won't benefit us in the long run. When you get to senior status, like I am, you're very concerned about the quality of health care.
Very fair.
I agree with Gerald that there is so much important biomedical research going on. It's also true that there are things to be critical about the indirect cost recovery ratios, ranging from 15% under the new regime, and that's closer to what some schools have received. And then you've had some schools, Hopkins notoriously, I think is 66 cents on the dollar. And so these kinds of things need to be reformed, but some of why it's late to come is because we have an unfunctioning, non-functioning Congress, right? We use the term co-equal branches of government, and that's true, and yet the founders' vision was that the legislative function should be in Article 1, and when the Congress doesn't do its work, you end up with a world where the administrative state has been on autopilot for a long time, and any changes that attempt to be made from the executive branch, and I'm not sympathetic to the bill of demands made of Harvard, but it feels like a big looking for the whiplash type phrase that you can use, because the executive branch shouldn't be making these decisions on their own. You should have an ongoing functioning process where Congress is directing dollars toward the sectors of the economy, biomedical research, that have broad public support, that should be funded by the feds, but through a plural private sector system.
Yeah. Well, I'm at an HBCU, historically black college and university in Austin, Texas. We're celebrating this year our 150th year in higher education, our sesquicentennial. Try saying that 10 times fast. And in our research, I found that I am the president and CEO of this great institution, and it's the third oldest business in the city of Austin. And for 150 years, we have been punching above our weight. And for us, you know, no one sent me a letter saying they're cutting $2 billion from my ecosystem. So I have said for a lot of times for our institutions, we have oftentimes done more with less. We oftentimes have more month than we have money. But yet we've remained responsible for ensuring that the upper middle class is there to teach, to create jobs, to be better citizens, to ensure that this America that I know that we all love is inclusive of people who look like me, who look like those who have decided that a HBCU is where they want to go and be and grow. And so I say that, you know, we've done a lot with a little. And I hope that in this iteration of where we are in America, that people will see that our institutions, this year, this fall, HBCUs saw an increase in college going. Our institution saw an increase, the highest enrollment of our traditional students in history. We have 200 students from Nepal. I'm like, how did you find us? Because the Instagram is powerful, okay?
Yes, it is.
But I am thankful and I am hopeful that that some of those funds are redirected to those institutions that we don't get to hear about, that are doing the work, that are putting students into careers that are meaningful. And so I hope that there is that there's an iteration where our HBCUs are supported, as our friends here in the audience can appreciate, that we are working our tails off to ensure that when you retire in July, that we can have great doctors and nurses and those in the healthcare industry, but we also have great citizens and people who are really conscious about the future of this world.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah. National reporting suggests that more than 60% of higher education faculty are liberal. It's a self-reporting survey. And there's a feeling among some segments of the American public that conservative viewpoints are discouraged among students and faculty. What is your perspective on this, and how can institutions ensure a diverse array of perspective among students, among faculty, among administration? Senator Sasse, I'd love to start with you.
Yeah, I think going back to some of the conversation we had earlier about humanities faculties, there are a lot of academic disciplines that have become ideological training grounds, but as, or more importantly, have just become ridiculously nichified. We have disciplines inside some of the humanities where the graduate work that is done is written for an audience of dozens, and it's going to be really difficult to persuade the public that this is important and worthy of funding, or that it's good training ground for becoming a great educator. So I don't want to see surveys of faculty ideological viewpoint, but I do want to see a world where students can be indifferent to the political convictions of their professors in the humanities, because that isn't your job when you're in the classroom. What you should want to do in the classroom is say, I'm a historian by training. A historian or an English faculty member, a sociologist, a psychologist, a sociologist, what I want students to do is become intoxicated by really great books and great arguments, and I get the privilege of introducing, not indoctrinating, introducing those students to debates that are bigger than themselves and longer lasting. So I think the monoculture problem in many of our humanities is a giant problem. It won't be solved by creating interrogation regimes to figure out what the political convictions are of faculty members. It will be changed by changing the culture of what kinds of debates you introduce your students to, and that's what lifelong learning is going to require. We have this regular shorthand where we talk about training kids for life or training kids and students for work. It's a false choice. To be trained well, you need both the qualitative and the quantitative. This world we're living on a hockey stick curve where where anything that can be quantified is going to be reduced eventually to marginal cost of zero. That's fundamentally what AI means. Whether it's 3 years from now or 23 years from now, we're all going to have robots that build robots for us, and that's awesome at one level. It's awesome as a consumer. It's scary as heck as a producer, because it means work is going to constantly evaporate. Mark Andreessen's old phrase, software is going to eat the world. We live in that moment. And so we're going to need to train people to do new kinds of work again and again and again. That isn't about training them for work. That's about training them to be thoughtful citizens who can wrestle with all that humanity requires. And we should have faculty that are excited to introduce people to that future.
I'm curious in that context, because I think we all can acknowledge that's absolutely right. How do you see institutions of higher ed needing to reorganize themselves around that context of lifelong learning, more distance learning, more technology-based? Do you all have thoughts on that?
Well, I think all of us are working to make sure that you have those programs, usually at the master's level, but sometimes at the baccalaureate, to get people to the next stop. And those change a lot. And so one of the things that I think is an advantage that we have at a private institution, if we want to issue a degree, we can have it on the street in 6 months. But you don't have to go through all the state forms and so on. And so we try to do that with constantly talking with industry and various people like that. We also have, I think back to the original question, I think we all have to, in institutions, have to talk about that political bias openly and within faculty groups and so on, so that it's a part of the discussion, because faculty hire faculty. And if you've got a department of 15 historians and 12 of them are liberal and 3 of them are conservative, when there's an opening spot, they're going to tend to go with the majority vote on that. And so that has to be talked about openly too. And so we've been trying on a lot of these searches to hit a point to where it's no longer quiet in the closet with it, that you've got to make sure that everybody understands that we need this, we need this, we need this. And they may not be compatible with your politics. And so it's a never-ending chore, but I think it's more important now than probably ever before.
Yeah. You know, you mentioned something about technology. We recently hosted the HBCU AI conference, and it was absolutely spectacular to hear and to know and to bring these institutions together to talk about the future, what the world will look like, and AI is here. I gave a talk and I said, you know, people are deciding if we should embrace this, you know, in higher education. And I said, well, you know, imagine being at the last board meeting of Blockbuster thinking, yeah, we're doing good, you know, or being at the last meeting at Radio Shack like, things are going great. I mean, you know, you have to, it is now, if you have a cell phone, forget it. Like, you know, you are into it. And so it is our responsibility to ensure that, you know, that our faculty, our staff are prepared. You mentioned about technology, but it is, I'm really focused and hyper-focused on getting the right faculty in front of the students to ensure that they are getting to the next level. I am running a business, and that means that my job is to ensure that our students they come in one way, but they leave prepared. And that means that the faculty that we're picking, the folks that are coming into our ecosystem, you know, they have to have that idea. They have to have that, they have to be centered around our mission. And when we're hiring and we're looking for talent, my focus is, can you get the student to the next level? What energy do you bring? What's your workforce experience? How do you ensure that they are prepared for tomorrow? And that's has been my hyper focus when thinking about faculty. How are you integrating AI into your classroom? How are you, you know, loving on our kids? Because they are here for a short period of time and they need to be ready to run, and they need to be ready to run fast as soon as they graduate.
I love it. Yeah. Well, our time is coming to a close. I wish we had twice as much time. I think everybody does. This is a fascinating conversation. The George W. Bush Center is big on optimism. It's part of the reason I love working here. So we're going to move into a quick lightning round. I would love to hear one thing that you all are optimistic about with regard to higher education and its role in democracy, civic life?
I'm optimistic about the future of all of the things you've just mentioned, because this is about the only place you get that opportunity. And I think most people understand that now's, I mean, this is it, this is where it has to happen, and it's your responsibility to make sure it does.
That's great.
I'm optimistic that a new world that people still choose us. And we can't take that for granted. Yeah. I don't take it for granted. I wake up every single morning excited and thrilled that I get to do this work, to see a student come in one way and leave out better than we found them. And I'm optimistic that our institutions, our higher education institutions, have this great opportunity to hit the reset button. And maybe now it's a hard reset button. But I believe that we've withstood challenges before, especially HBCUs. And I envision that tomorrow, that we have not yet seen our greatest days, and they are ahead of us. And so I'm thankful and excited about that, and very, very, very optimistic about what we have, the work that we have to do ahead of us.
I'll borrow from Melva's language, both about the reset button and those great Radio Shack blockbuster jokes. I'm going to borrow those. Those are good. The American higher ed system is a glory. Around the world, it is an aspirational thing to come study at our institutions, and yet there's been a lot of lethargy. And so even though this is a bumpy moment, I do think you have a lot more people acknowledging the need to have a what does reform look like conversation, and that's a great and healthy thing. We have been too sleepy about the most important, most interesting 4 years of your life. If you can go back to any time in your life, 18 to 22 is a pretty great place to pick. And right now, there's not enough life change that happens for most kids at most institutions. I agree with Melva's point as well. In HBCUs in general, or maybe more broadly, first-gen kids are having a lot of life change when they get to college. But a lot of other students are having a quasi-country club experience for 48 months, and it's too interesting a moment in life where you have an opportunity to do cause and prepare for cause, prepare for a whole bunch of life that's going to be disrupted in fascinating and interesting ways. And I think we have boards of trustees at a lot of institutions. University of Texas, you see this, University of North Carolina, University of Florida. We've been building the Hamilton Center, which is a really special new liberal arts college at the core of the institution. And I think trustees and alums and donors asking these questions is ultimately a really healthy thing.
Well, this has been a fantastic discussion. We are going to break, and we'll need to be back in seats at 10:25. Please join me in thanking our wonderful panelists.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Our program will resume shortly. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Executive Director of the George W. Bush Institute, David Kramer.
Good morning, everybody, and thanks for coming back after the break. I have the distinct honor of recognizing the Institute's citation recipient. This citation was created to acknowledge an organization that makes an impact on the community and inspires others to take action to solve today's most pressing challenges. The recipient must demonstrate a sustained commitment to the cause and be a model by which others are measured. Bridge USA fits this description to a T. Bridge USA was founded in 2017 by young Americans seeking dialogue over division. After seeing polarization consume their own college campuses, a group of students started a movement to bridge differences and change how to talk about politics. They'd hold regular meetings built to be civic space for open conversations. Their aim isn't to tell students what they should or should not believe, but how to talk about sensitive matters, particularly when in disagreement. And after 7 years, they have 82 active chapters in 40 states on college campuses across the nation. These chapters are student-led and often regular opportunities for civil discussions, attending workshops and organizing talks with speakers from both sides of the political aisle. Their secret sauce, if you will, in these discussions includes several ingredients. First, listen to listen, not to respond. Second, don't interrupt or have side conversations. Third, remember that a person represents themselves, not a broader demographic or group. And fourth, when a disagreement arises, critique the argument in its substance, not the person making the argument. At the Bush Institute, we have adopted these norms into our listening sessions of our own and found them extremely helpful. They cut through the clutter and allow for human connection on common ground. The Bridge USA mindset champions understanding, empathy, open-mindedness, and a willingness to engage those who may be different from us. At a time when many believe polarization is the biggest threat facing our country, Bridge USA is building leaders who will change the way Americans interact. Accepting this award on behalf of the organization is Manu Meal, co-founder and CEO of Bridge USA. But before he comes to the stage, we'd like to showcase Bridge USA's participants respectfully and joyfully engaging in this critical dialogue.
We have 28% liberal students, we have 28% conservative students, and we have 44% independent/undecided folks. That is an insane statistic because that is literally the division in the country, which is amazing. It's an ideologically representative sample. These types of gatherings don't exist.
Bridging the gap between two major divides in this country. And who better to tackle that than the next generation of students?
Conservative versus liberal versus authoritarian versus libertarian. I think there's a lot more opportunity for people to find that common ground than we realize in society today.
I'm grateful to live in a country that's home to a stable democracy with regular elections that stands for justice.
I believe a country's greatness is measured by how well it serves its citizens and provides them with opportunities for growth.
How much of success is really opportunity-based, and how much of success comes from being able to have opportunities that not everyone else has?
In and of ourselves, America is an echo chamber. We only listen to people who have our opinions, and the whole point of Bridge is to do the complete opposite of that.
It is about you, it is not about me. 50 chapters, we started with 5. We've got hundreds of thousands of dollars now ready to mobilize our movement. We started with like 10 in our first discussion. We were in 1 state, now we're in 22. All under the age of 25. It is possible. It is within you.
Gentlemen, the recipient of the George W. Bush Institute Citation, Manu Meal.
Well, hello, everybody. I guess Secretary Gates yesterday said that the young kids have a bad rap, so I think this is the session to sort of uncover that portion. Let me just say I have a deep sense of gratitude to the George W. Bush Institute, to David Kramer, to the entire staff, but most importantly, the award that we're accepting today is a representation of the hard work of the students that I work with on a daily basis. In fact, we have some of our colleagues here today, Haley, Usma. I want to leave you with one sort of insight as I've been listening to the conversations, the panel, the engagement that we've had over the last 5 to 6 hours. And that is that I think we're actually a lot closer to a culture of pluralism than we think. Here's what I mean by that. This award brought me back to a day that changed the trajectory of my life. February 2nd, 2017. I was a freshman at UC Berkeley. I was a pre-med student, so standing next to an award by the George W. Bush Institute is kind of shocking to me.
I was walking back from my math seminar, and I distinctly remember protests in the distance as helicopters were flying overhead and as students were violently engaged in trying to demonstrate against a specific speaker that had come to campus. And I remember walking past a cafe, and the cafe, the window was broken in. Inside it said, CNN, UC Berkeley students protest free speech. Now, I didn't know what any of that meant. I didn't know the concept of free speech at that time to the extent that I know it now, but there was one thing that was clear, and that was the amount of pain, the amount of anger, the amount of intolerance that was existing within the student body between young people across the board. And it got me thinking about one thing, which is that the next day, me and some random people, some of them that are now my best friends, we got together and we said, we're going to create a space for young people to be able to listen, to be able to have a conversation, to be able to engage. And that conversation that we hosted, it changed the trajectory of my life because it showed me that I think we radically underestimate how divided we are, and I think we radically overestimate the power of a conversation. But at this moment, when we can engage, when we can listen, we can actually engage in conversations at an incredible scale. Right now, our students are demonstrating one thing, and that is that the problem in our country is not that we're incredibly divided. The problem in our country is that we have a loud minority of voices across the political spectrum, I call it the crazy uncle problem, that dominate the conversation while the rest of us are completely silent. And so the question becomes, how do you build an identity? How do you build a movement? How do you build a concept and an infrastructure around this idea of pluralism where you activate that silent majority? What's so special about this award is that it is a representation and an affirmation of the silent majority of young people on college campuses that we work with on a daily basis to say, when you sit in class, when you're listening, and forget college campuses, beyond in our broader society, when you're there and you're holding tight and you're saying, man, that's crazy, you're not alone. In fact, there's a possibility for a movement at this time. The reason why I think this work is going to succeed, the reason why I think pluralism at this time is necessary, the reason why my friends and I work incredibly hard to support these chapters, we work with presidents and political leaders from across the spectrum, is that we understand and believe that to engage, to listen, to dialogue is a 21st century skill. It's a skill as important as AI competency or being technologically engaged. I believe that dialogue at this time is necessary because we live in the most ambitious democratic experiment in the history of humanity. Imagine I told you there's a society out there with 330 million people, all of whom look differently than each other, heavily armed, trying to make it work. That's an aberration in the context of the human race and civilization. What we do on a daily basis, what our students are doing on the front lines of their college campuses, is they're demonstrating that when you meet difference, not with violence, not with intolerance, but conversation, with listening, with engagement, you are actually in the majority of people that are lighting the vanguard for what tomorrow can look like. I'll be honest with you. I think that my generation's political project is a political project that is going to be focused on uplifting a new divide. And that divide is not between the right and the left. That divide is between people that believe in being open-minded and people that believe in being closed-minded. I believe that that divide is between people that want to listen to people that are different than themselves and people that want to shut people out. I believe that the new divide is a divide between people that believe in the opportunity of a conversation to be able to build something better and people that believe that conversation is antithetical to democracy. There's an opportunity for a new tent. There's an opportunity for a new hope. And our students are doing that on a daily basis. And so I've got one ask for you, which is at this time of incredible hopelessness, remember that dialogue and conversation is actually the counterculture. We are actually the rebellion against the status quo. In a moment when outrage sells, students and young people across the country believe that we need to be able to listen, because if we don't have that, then we can't pull off what Thomas Paine said was humanity's last best hope. Thank you so much to everybody here, and thank you so much to the George W. Bush Institute for this award. I'm so grateful to be representing our students.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the President and CEO of the Pew Charitable Trusts, Susan K. Uran.
Good morning. I'm delighted to join you and to welcome our next panel. I do want to start by thanking President Bush for hosting this forum on the role that leadership plays in preserving American democracy and creating a more perfect union. This year's honorees exemplify that kind of leadership, and I'm grateful to each of them for the contributions they've made to our country. I want to talk about something for a few minutes that's been on my mind and may have been on your mind as well, and that is, how do we rebuild trust in our public institutions and our democratic institutions? This trust is absolutely essential if we're going to preserve government by and for the people, but it's becoming increasingly difficult in these divisive times. About 2 in 3 adults agree that a low level of trust in government makes it harder to solve our nation's problems, and a whopping 85% of Americans say that they don't think elected officials care what people like them think. Next year, we'll be celebrating 250 years of American independence, and I hope that's going to provide an opportunity for us to reverse these trends, to begin to rebuild trust, and to move our country forward. So Pew is based in Philadelphia, the birthplace of American democracy, and we consider democracy to be the cornerstone of our work. You may know us best from the Pew Research Center and the data that it generates that reflects society's voices, enriches the public dialogue, and supports thoughtful decision-making. But we also have a long history of nonpartisan, data-driven work that focuses on improving policy and producing measurable and positive impacts for all Americans. Now, the democratic process can be messy, and we know that strengthening democratic institutions is essential to future prosperity for American families and communities. And at times when political divisions are entrenched, a nonpartisan approach can encourage healthy dialogue and compromise focused on solving problems and on serving the public. A fact-based approach is especially needed now when Americans are losing faith in the ability of their government to understand and serve their needs. But facts are not enough. To be successful, we must also do the truly hard work of engaging with people who bring different perspectives to the table. While we may focus on party affiliation when we go to the polls, our fellow citizens are all multifaceted individuals playing different roles at home and in their communities, and they are often looking for help in building common ground. As you'll hear from the next panel, mutual understanding, facts and trust, and the democratic institutions that depend on them are fostered by a vigorous fourth estate. But like many other American institutions, trust in the media has declined, and more people are getting their information from non-traditional sources. The drift toward non-traditional news is striking. So to take just one example, in the 3 years between 2020 and 2023, the share of U.S. adults who regularly got news from TikTok rose from 3% to 14%. And about 1 in 5 Americans say that they get news from online influencers, and that's primarily individuals rather than media outlets. This is why the Pew Research Center is partnering with the Knight Foundation to improve our understanding of how Americans gather information and how that information fuels beliefs, shapes identities, and forges communities and affects civic participation. We hope that by examining these trends, we can develop a fact-based foundation that leaders in government and the press can use to help restore trust. And that's exactly the conversation that we're about to engage in with our next panel on restoring trust in the media, featuring Marty Barron, the former executive editor of the Washington Post, and Jessica Yellen, the founder of News Not Noise, and it's moderated by Nicole Bibbins-Sadaka from the George W. Bush Institute. I am very much looking forward to hearing what these remarkable media leaders have to say. So please join me in welcoming the next panel.
Well, I am delighted to be moderating this conversation, which is extraordinarily important and timely, as we all know. What we know is that free and independent press is absolutely essential to a healthy and vibrant democracy. A free and independent press is how we get information and analysis that allows us as citizens to be engaged in our society. Free and media and independent press reports on government action, which is extraordinarily important to government accountability. And it allows a public debate to be encouraged in a society to ensure that we are part of the conversations that impact us every day. The First Amendment contains an explicit protection of the freedom of the press, which recognizes the centrality of a free and independent press. And our topic today of restoring trust in media is timely because, according to a recent Gallup poll, just 31% of Americans express confidence in radio, television, and newspapers to report the news fairly and accurately. And unfortunately, mass media came in last out of 10 civic and political institutions that the survey included. And yet, a free and independent press is one of the most important cornerstones of a democracy. So I am thrilled to be joined by two extraordinary journalists who understand the importance of our press in a healthy democracy and have been an extraordinarily important part of that themselves in their distinguished careers. So Marty, let me start with you. Let's take a historical look at the importance of free expression in the United States and within a healthy democracy. Can you just give us a historical perspective of what that has looked like and how that's evolved in the United States?
Sure, it's been a long and rocky road, but I'll have to give you the TikTok version. Actually the inaugural edition of the first newspaper in this land was in 1690. It was published, and then the very next day, the colonial governor and council of Massachusetts shut it down. And they said that the printing press was the source of libel against the best government. Apologize if the language sounds familiar. And then, jump ahead, 1791, we got the ratification of the Bill of Rights. And that, of course, had the First Amendment, which provided for free expression, free press, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, freedom to petition your government for grievances, all of that. So that was good news for the press, obviously. But then only 7 years later, John Adams, the second president of the United States, signed the Sedition Act. That made it really difficult, and it was actually against the law to incite opposition to any law passed by Congress or any act of the President of the United States. It was one of the most repressive measures in the history of the country against a free press. Thankfully, the American public actually rose up against that. James Madison, who was the principal author of the First Amendment, talked about the need for freely examining public measures, public characters and measures. And he talked about the First Amendment as being, the free press actually being the most effectual guarantor of all other rights. So that was good, and then finally that act expired with John Adams out of office, and Thomas Jefferson came in and said the diffusion of information was essential in this country and that the free press was essential to governance in this country as well. And you jump ahead then to, so a lot of jumping here, it's the TikTok version after all. And you jump ahead to, let's say, to 1917, Woodrow Wilson in office, one of the most repressive times, basically prohibiting criticism of government and of the military, and a really difficult time. So much so that Teddy Roosevelt, one of his predecessors, said that he had criminalized the truth, actually, and so you had, under Woodrow Wilson, you had another Sedition Act. You had the Espionage Act of 1917. The Sedition Act went away. Ultimately, the Espionage Act still exists today, the Espionage Act of 1917. And frankly, I'm confident that at some point that's going to be weaponized again against the press. We really did not develop sort of the real freedoms that we have today for the press until about basically until World War II, and with FDR, who supported that, and people saw the consequences of not having freedom of expression, not having a free press. They saw that in the Third Reich. They saw that in Imperial Japan. And so at the time, the Supreme Court robustly supported freedom of the press, and famously, Supreme Court Justice Robert Jackson talked about how every person in this country needs to be his own watchman for the truth, because you can't trust any government to distinguish what's true from what's false. And so that's where we are today, and it's been a rocky road. remains a rocky for the press and for free expression generally. And I would just point out that the rights for the press are really the same rights as everybody else. We don't have any special rights. It's the right of free expression, the same right that provides for free expression by all people, by expression in terms of religion, expression in terms of assembly, and in terms of any right to petition your government.
Mm-hmm. That was an extraordinary overview, and just a reminder also that these have been heavily debated issues from the founding, prior to the founding of our country, and really very different visions. And yet this principle of the importance of truth and fact-based reporting and of an independent press has been a thread that has been woven through the fabric of our nation from the very beginning. Jessica, the media industry is facing many challenges. I will start with a very underreported statement. Can you speak to some of those challenges that the industry is facing and highlight how particularly the expansion of the digital space has been a major opportunity and a challenge?
Yes. First, may I say thank you to President and Mrs. Bush and the Bush Center for having me and for including the press in a conversation about America's leadership. It is important, and it is also reassuring as a journalist that it's included. Thank you. And Marty, I want to say you're one of my personal reporting heroes. So it feels very special to share a stage with you and to watch you do your first TikTok.
Oh, yeah. If only
You
it
saw
were.
it here. It's not fake news at all.
All set up.
Can you get me on? That'd
With
be
an
great.
account, yeah, we'll work on it. Get you some followers. So, listen, we're not breaking news if we say that the media is facing enormous challenges. There's the loss of trust by the public, which we heard Pew talk about, and I was going to quote their numbers, but better to hear it from Pew directly. There's the threat that they are facing and that media companies are facing on a business level from new platforms, from Facebook and all these, TikTok, et cetera. There is the challenge of, people inside the media, this new media, fuzzying up what truth is, and then there are these attacks coming from the political sphere on the press. All of this is true, and all of it is a threat that we talk about at great length. I would like to argue against one piece of conventional wisdom, which is that the audience doesn't want truth. And I will tell you that I do my work on social media all day, every day. I'm back there posting before I came out here. I'm in direct contact with people all day. And the number one question I get is this true? And they'll forward me something and ask me to answer that question. Now, it speaks to the problem, which is they don't know how to answer it for themselves, and I know we'll talk about that, but I also want to underscore that it is meaningful that they want to know, and that they're coming to me, a person they know has years of checking facts, right, and confirming with sources to get that information. Quickly, so you have a sense, because I'm a new media kind of entity, I left legacy media about it's been like 10 years now. And I had the experience while I was in journalism as a political reporter of interviewing undecided voters all the time who would yell at me because they didn't understand what we were talking about in the news. And I decided I was going to go where this piece of the audience is and do the news on Instagram. And I started explaining the news in 3-minute videos on Instagram going back 6 years now. And fast forward, I have a large audience, I'm engaged. What I've done is now become a model for many others to do it too. And I think of what I do, if you think of Uber as the last mile in transportation, I'm the first mile in news. I help you know what a tariff is, I help you understand what the bond market is. I say this is a story that matters, that one you can ignore. And there's an audience that wants that. The question is, what do we do now to help find more of them and connect them with more sources they can trust?
I do want to come back to that because I do think the role of the audience, of the consumer of information is extraordinarily important because quite often we're focused just on the industry and its responsibility and its role. But at the end of the day, each of us as individual citizens has a tremendous amount of agency to be in this. Marty, so the title of our panel is Restoring Trust in Media. We are facing a denigration of trust and the devaluing of expertise and of objective facts. Why do you think that is? And how can the press continue to play its crucial role amidst what is really a broader societal trend in mistrust in institutions, but also mistrust in truth?
Yeah. Well, it's a complicated issue. And I do think we have a serious problem in this country. We as a society cannot agree on a common set of facts. And it's actually worse than that. We can't even agree on how to determine how one determines what is a fact, because so much of what we've used in the past historically to determine facts has been devalued or denied or denigrated. So things like education, things like expertise, things like experience, and things like, above all, actual evidence, what you can see with your own eyes and hear with your own ears. All of that's been devalued, and that's a very dangerous place to be, not just for the press, obviously, but for democracy and then for societal progress overall. With regard to the press, the decline, actually the high point was really about at the time of Watergate, and because of the press's reporting on Watergate, because that reporting was ultimately validated, as controversial as it was at the time. And then people saw that what, particularly the Washington Post, but others had reported about President Nixon at the time, turned out to be true. And so there were 70% approval ratings for the press at the time. You can see how far we've fallen. Yeah. There's been a long, steady decline since that period of time, but it's really accelerated, I think, pretty much at the time of where the internet became something that everybody used. The internet has facilitated a real fragmentation in the media market. Anybody can go anywhere to find some site that affirms their pre-existing view of the world. And people like to be told that what they believe is true, okay? Mm-hmm. And I think we're at a stage where a lot of people, they've confused beliefs with facts. And so we have enormous fragmentation, enormous number of outlets, and that's the challenge that we have, one of the challenges that we have today, and people don't know what to believe, what's true, who should they believe, on what basis. With regard to the legacy press, I always like being called legacy because I'm certainly of the age that qualifies me as legacy. But it's a kind word. But by the way, I've done 2 TikToks before this as well, so just want you to know you can all research them and go find them. They're all hilarious.
Everybody's starting to look, Googling them.
But anyway, what do we do? I think that we need to, first of all, I think the press needs to cover its community and its country fully and fairly, writing about people so that they see their lives accurately and honestly and honorably reflected in our coverage. All of their struggles, which there are many, their worries, their expectations for themselves and their families, and apart from politics, just what are their lives like, what are they struggling against, what do they hope for, all of that. I think that's really important that we do that. Secondly, I think it's really important that we be much more transparent about how we go about our work and the work that we do. So I'm not just saying who we are, but all the work that was done, because somehow people think that we just sat there and made stuff up, when in fact reporters are all over the country, all over the world, including in conflict zones, putting their own lives at risk in many instances to gather information and disseminate it. So whenever there's a court document, we need to show that court document. We have the tools to do that on the internet, the whole document, so that people can see where it came from. Same thing with a video, show the entire video. People can see whether or not we took it out of context, the entire audio, and whenever there's a data set, we need to point people to that data set with a link, say this is where that information comes from. And the message to people needs to be, this is the work we did. You have a right to check it. We're going to give you the opportunity to check it. You can see whether we took anything out of context. And that should be the signal. And then the final thing that we need to do is we need to recognize that our forms of communication are not working today. The way that people are consuming information has changed dramatically. All of you who have kids or grandkids can see that. Jessica is at the forefront of that with new media, is finding new ways to communicate. And we at established communications companies, we should recognize this nasty fact, which is that we are failing to communicate effectively. And so we need to find new ways of communicating that communicate authenticity. We focus so much on authority, all the reporting that we've done. going deep, but there's distrust in institutions generally. Senator Sasse was talking about that eloquently before. And there's distrust in all institutions, not just in the press, but in all institutions, in Congress, the presidency, big business, pharmaceutical companies, you name it, across the board, with the notable exception of the military. And so we come across as an institution that people don't trust. Podcasters and influencers and sort of emerging media outlets are communicating authenticity. And we need to figure out how to communicate authenticity, otherwise we don't get credit for authority. And so there are a number of things that we need to work on. Throughout, I think we actually need to remain totally committed to our mission in journalism, which is to give, as I define it, to give the public the information it needs and deserves to know so that people can govern themselves. And at the heart of that mission is, James Madison talked about freely examining public characters and measures, and the word examining always sticks out to me. It means that we need to go behind the curtain and beneath the surface about what's happening in our government and what's happening with others who have disproportionate influence on our society and on our democracy. And that's at the core, is that we need to do that. That's the accountability function of the press. And we need to be able to, do that fearlessly. But we also need to hold ourselves to really the highest possible standards, to be professional at all times. And I worry that, frankly, that there's been an erosion in standards in journalism, and I've been a big critic of that erosion of standards in journalism.
I'd love to come back to that particular question, but Jessica, let me go to you. Can you speak to this issue also of trust in media, particularly from the perspective of digital media? Marty's talked about just the fact that there is a proliferation of different platforms and there's a different way that people consume media. Like, what do we need to understand about this moment and about how both legacy media and digital, like the expansion of it, what does that look like?
So to underscore something Marty said, the trust is shifting from institutions, right, like brands, to individuals. So an example, people might not trust the Wall Street Journal as a brand, but they might love a reporter at the Wall Street Journal that they follow on social. I've heard from my audience that they feel like they know me as well as a member of their own family, because mom calls on the phone and you see her in FaceTime, boyfriend calls, and then there I am doing a video. It's this intimate, right, they call it the parasocial relationship. But this extends to all the people who are in new media, right, have these different relationships, and there's so much, it's the Wild West of information. First, as we all know, you have more information in this phone coming at you at all times than we've ever had in the history of humanity. It's overwhelming, it's exhausting, a lot of it's negative. Algorithms are designed to feed you more content that triggers strong emotions, rage and outrage lead, right? So you have the people who are pushing anger, pushing partisanship, also perform, they get bigger numbers, they get in your feed more. There's also a conspiracy world out there where, my gosh, I could tell you about these 20 extra continents that were never talked about in school that live behind the ice in Antarctica and control us all. You can spend a day watching videos about this, or about how Blue Origin, and there's plenty of conversation about it, the rocket ship with all the women in it, never actually went up, it's all a fake, right? It's all on a green screen. So there's that. There's also this other area where you have creators who have this strong bond I'm talking about of trust, talking to their audience often about health, and insisting that this supplement is good in that, and they're not revealing that they're paid to say that, right? So there's something like, I can't remember the stat right now, but more than 60% of people who are talking about a brand are not telling you that they're paid by the brand or actually themselves monetizing off it. Then there's this other category online now of political people who are bringing you the news, and they seem like they're newscasters, and in fact they're paid for by political action committees. Political money that has a mission. That's not, it might be fact-based and it's fine to consume it, but it's not disclosed. Yeah. And so one of the challenges now is how do we get our arms around what's happening in this world? We know that the platforms are not going to do something, right? They're going to do, if anything, the wrong thing, feeding you more of the bad stuff. To just wrap it up, the platforms in the last month declared that they're all out of the content moderation game. They're not fact-checking. We're on our own. So this is an opportunity and a call to action for those of us who care to figure out what we're going to do outside the platforms, what institutions, what tools, and what structures we need to stand up to be entrepreneurial and innovative, to help both the creator community that is based on fact know how to talk about it, talk about whether they're practicing journalism, and help the audience meet up. And there are solutions we can get behind.
Can you just give a few of those solutions? Because I'm just thinking also, if we're looking at 60% of the people who are sharing, or not sharing the fact that they are paid to talk about whatever health supplement that they are advertising, or there are other people who come across as news, what are the ways? Is that a governmental action? Is that citizen education? Like, where is the locus of change?
This is my favorite question.
Oh,
all
great.
these panels,
It
we
wasn't
always
even on my
focus on the
card.
problem part, the first third of the deck, and never get to like the solution part.
Great.
What can we get behind? 3 things, if I'm going to remember them all. First, just like you have a LEED certification for a building, this follows certain standards. There can be outside entities that set up standards. This is what a journalist does when they're basic, this is journalistic practices. And individuals can apply to get that check mark. Yes, there'll be some that are on the right. Yes, there'll be some on the left, maybe. But then an outside audience can know those are, if I like this creator, if I like Jessica, here are the other people who practice journalism like her. That's one idea, right? Problems with it, there's solutions. Another is we could use a backbone for people who are news creators to know, like, what if they could get some educational material that Marty Barron teaches, here's what it is to be a journalist, here's how you check a source. Some of these people would love to, they don't know. How do you have editorial oversight, legal checking, networking with each other? Every time I'm reporting on nutrition, I shouldn't have to learn this thing because RFK said it. There's somebody out there who knows. Okay, that's 2. 3 is we can be the distribution arm for legacy media. There should be a major media brand that partners with me and says, would you put out our content? I already do it every day. I put up in stories on Instagram, these are the important stories. I link to the Wall Street Journal, I link to NBC. I'm telling my audience you can trust these places. That should be formalized. Those are 3 solutions we can execute on now.
Excellent, excellent. Marty, let me come back to you. Free expression is naturally not just a question, as we said, for journalists. It's a broader societal issue. And you mentioned the declining trust that we're seeing in institutions across the board. What are you seeing in other industries or sectors that concern you and will impact, or is probably already impacting, the media industry and freedom of the press?
Well, I think this was discussed a little bit at the first panel today. People talking about how people are afraid to speak up for reprisal, for fear of reprisal, afraid to speak up because they'll be attacked in some way, maybe even physically attacked. That's the environment that we're living in today, and it's very sad. I really think that there needs to be, often when we talk about free expression, people think that that's something for the press, and the press has been the biggest advocate for free expression. But it's not just a right for the press, it's a right for everyone. It's a right for businesses to be able to advocate for the policies that they actually believe in. There should be in my view, there should be a business constituency for free expression. There should be in higher education. Obviously, the whole notion of higher education is that there should be free expression. And notwithstanding all the debates about how well they do that and cancel culture and all of that, the goal should be that everybody should be able to speak freely and learn from each other, and not fear that they are going to suffer consequences for merely having spoken up. And in many instances spoken up truthfully about the history of the country or the history of the world or whatever it might be. And so I think that there needs to be sort of a broad coalition in support of free expression that includes the press but is not exclusive to the press. And I worry that we're losing our sense that we're entitled to free expression, and that not we are just entitled to free expression, that you are entitled to free expression too, even if you disagree with me. So I would love to see something like that. I fear for I do feel that there is an erosion in free expression, and an erosion in people feeling they just feel that they were going to suffer reprisals for having spoken up.
Mm-hmm. And where does the education of the average person? Where is that locus? Is that in our schools? Is that in our universities? Is that the responsibility of the media to help the average person understand freedom of the press, but also freedom of expression, as you're saying, is not just this abstract thing that someone else has to worry about. It is our all day, every day.
Well, it's all of those places, actually. I think that, look, it is in the First Amendment, so we should learn that. We should learn that as part of civic education, certainly in the schools, and learn exactly what that means and why there are so many great advantages to that. And that it's a foundation, it's one of the fundamental principles of our society, along with things like rule of law, okay? I think that certainly the press needs to advocate for itself. I don't think we've done a very good job of that, of even explaining how we do our jobs and how it's different from everybody else. But why we need to have free expression. But that's got to come from the schools, got to come from, grade school to high school, to middle school, to high school, to college. And certainly from the press and lots of other institutions. I think all of them have to be part of that. I'm a big supporter, for example, of a news organization called the News Literacy Project, which has, and their job is to try to train people to be critical consumers of, it's totally nonpartisan, critical consumers of information, how to evaluate information, what kinds of questions you need to ask in order to assess whether this is a reliable source of information or an unreliable source of information. And I think that's really important to do as well.
Excellent. Jessica, what responsibility does the consumer of information play in ensuring that we have a strong, vibrant, free, and independent press?
We all have to take responsibility for I always call it our information diet. Just like you think about what you're putting in your mouth, you have to think about what you're putting in your brain. And it's a new world, right? And part of what media literacy is, and they've adapted to talk about the digital space, and Pointer does it too. How do you teach sort of the next generation to be smart about what they're consuming? I have a friend from college who's very smart, but doesn't always act it, and sends me all these videos saying, why aren't you reporting this? And you look at the video and it's from Fiery Cat 789, and I look at who is Fiery Cat, and there's no information about where this is coming from. Like, why do you trust this? So teaching kids and others to stop your scroll, look at that byline or the name, go back and see if you can find out who this person is or what their credentials are. That's a piece of it, yes. But there's no amount of media literacy or critical thinking that can empower people to really decipher our new media landscape yet, because we haven't built the infrastructure and tools that give the people who care about the truth the clues to know who's in and who's not. So what I mean is, for example, when I said that my number one question is this true? I will respond to people. Very often they'll send me something that's quite obviously to me true or quite obviously not true. And I'll respond and I'll give them their answer. And I assumed at first they didn't know how to find that out. So I'd say, just so you know, you could Google this with these keywords or go to this source. And they go, oh, I know. It's just that Google would give me 20 million results, and how do I know which to believe? I trust you. So people feel deeply disempowered in their discernment because they don't know how to navigate this minefield. And I think we are in the media at a stage akin to where the music industry was when streaming came on board. The music industry, when streaming started, said, streaming's terrible, put it back in the box. But you can't do that. So what did they do? Eventually they adapted. And there are new protocols and new ways to take new streaming stars and make them trusted by lots of people, followed, but pair them up with some new tools, some new infrastructure, and with old labels in new ways. So they've found a bridge to adapt the old and new. We are in the cusp of building that. We need to start now.
Who regulates or oversees that labeling? And how does that get done, or who would? If we were to pursue some sort of labeling?
I mean, my proposal or belief is we need outside entities. They can be philanthropic that do this. And every time I pitch this, people are like, well, somebody's going to discredit it as untrue, or this person's going to be in and out. Fine, start, adapt. Maybe there'll be some that are lefty, maybe there'll be some that are righty. At least you have a place where if you're a fact-based person, you can know and get a clue. It used to be the check mark on Twitter told you.
Right.
But we all know you can buy that now, it means nothing. So it's not even Twitter anymore. So my point is, I've just been frustrated that every time I start conversations with funders or philanthropies, it's just too new of a world that not ready to engage, and it's later than we think. I think we need to just start trying some things off platform on our own to build this new infrastructure.
Okay. And is the philanthropic community recognizing this moment that we're in and the need to? There we go.
I think it has, first of all, it should be entrepreneurial private individuals who get what it means to take a risk and have, an investment that's not going to 20x, but will be self-sustaining and profitable because it matters. And philanthropies, my challenge has been there's a lot of interest in local news, and then there's an interest in identity-driven news, and then just human news and digital space, there's not support for that. I've even tried to apply for awards, and I don't know which box to check. I'm not legacy, I'm not podcast, I don't know. So we haven't moved into this moment of new fact creator-based news.
Let me turn to both of you. At the Bush Institute, we always focus on being action-oriented. And so I would love, you've given quite a few specific next steps that we need to think about, but I want to make sure that I give each of you time to really think about what are those and share with the audience what those specific action items are, either for individuals and those of us who are consumers of media, for legacy or newer platforms, or the philanthropic or other communities as they're thinking about this moment. What are some of those action items that I think that should be on top of our mind of capturing this moment and addressing what is a crucial issue?
Well, this would be a pretty broad response, so I apologize for that. It's not like 10 easy steps to fixing this problem, because it's a very difficult problem. I think all of us in a variety of institutions need to get away from performative behavior and move to thinking, how do we perform in the public interest, okay? There's way too much performative behavior in the media, on social media, people trying to draw attention to themselves rather than really bringing attention to the needs of ordinary people. And I think that's true in Congress, by the way, as well. A lot of performative behavior, merely to draw attention to themselves, to raise money, whatever it is, as opposed to thinking, how do we actually do something that can be constructive here and work together to accomplish that. That's number one. Number two is that I think we have to move away from demonizing other people and moving to a place where we actually respect other people and we recognize that these are human beings. They may have a different worldview, and you want to understand what that worldview is. You're not obligated to agree with their worldview, but that they're not enemies. They are not garbage. All of that. I think that's really important. And then the third thing that I would mention is that I really think we need to all be committed to the pillars of our democracy and recognize what those pillars are. Obviously, I've dedicated my career and my life to one of those, which is a free press. The founders of the country did think that was a pillar of democracy, and I happen to believe and to know that there is no, and never has been, any democracy without a free and independent press. There cannot be, and that's why leaders who are moving in an authoritarian direction hope to extinguish an independent press. That's the first step in extinguishing the rights of all citizens and the rights of all citizens to express themselves. But all of the pillars of our democracy are courts. We need to commit ourselves to making sure that our courts are strong and independent. Yes. We need to make sure that our Congress performs its job of actually looking into things and not being a rubber stamp. And we need to certainly respect the presidency, the role of the presidency, but also recognize that the presidency is not the government. The government is much broader than that, and our democracy is much broader than that. And so those are the three things that I would say that all of us in all institutions and all Americans that we ought to be committed to, including those of us in the press.
Absolutely, and thank you for that, because I think those are the fundamental pieces of a democracy, and I think those of us who have studied international democracy in the world and watched it decline in many places in the world, it is exactly when these freedoms, freedom of the press and independent judiciary and others are attacked, is when we do see those declines. Jessica, what would you say is the action items that we need to be thinking about? You've mentioned a number in your remarks.
Well, I guess it would be a call to this audience that has so many business leaders and people who are entrepreneurial to think about whether that's something that you're interested in helping to solve. I think I laid out 3 very concrete things, and it can be nonprofit, it can be for-profit, it's just about starting. We'll solve it as we go. You know, I'll quote another president, a Democratic president, John F. Kennedy, said that the free press is the only private business explicitly protected in the Constitution because it's so fundamental to ensuring we have an informed citizenry who can make informed decisions when they vote. You know, Marty couldn't say it more clearly, and you've dedicated your career to this. We need to empower our people with knowledge. So I think it's not just important, but at this moment in our history, it's urgent, and it requires private solutions, private individuals to work with the press.
Excellent. I could continue this conversation for a much longer period. We have 2 extraordinary experts who've shared a lot of very practical, action-oriented solutions, but really also made a compelling case for why the free and independent media is so central to our democracy. So please join me in thanking them. Thank you. And just a little bit of housekeeping. For those of you who are here with us, we're going to take a very, very short break. I'm stressing very short break, and then come back at 11:30. We try and run everything very much on time here. So short break, back at 11:30 for a private keynote conversation. For those of you who are watching virtually, this concludes our public content. We just thank you for being with us virtually. Enjoy the break. Thank you. Thank you.